the economy.
I know we would come to the issue of motives
Yes.
Later. But then, even at this stage, as he tried to dominate everything, it had a material and financial effect on him personally. Could you address that?
Well, certainly he became one of the richest in the country, and by all estimates, one of the wealthiest in the continent amongst heads of state. Jammeh's property in Gambia are still being counted as we speak. He is said to have been worth, at minimum, $360 million. Others estimated at least $1 billion. He has houses.
Perhaps maybe you could read out paragraph 85.
85, okay.
Well, the Jammeh Commission you meant to say in this paragraph.
Oh, okay.
But yes.
The Jammeh Commission, thank you for the correction. In fact, the Jammeh Commission and Attorney General and Minister of Justice have since revealed that Jammeh misappropriated millions of dollars from Gambia's central bank, as well as other government-owned institutions such as the Social Security and Housing Corporation. He had, for all intents and purposes, transformed these financial institutions into his own ATM.
What do you mean by transformed these financial institutions into his own ATM?
Well, he could at ease withdraw money, sending his personnel from the president's office to collect money with only a note sent to the governor for these monies to be withdrawn. In fact, I suspect that some of them he didn't even send, but it was that easy for him to get money. I mean, I
think the mere invocation of his name
absolutely would make those officials comply.
Proceed, please.
Okay.
By the end of his rule?
By the end of his rule, Jammeh had literally emptied state coffers alongside a fleet of high-end car purchases, an airplane, expensive trips and investments on land, bakeries, and any venue, and a venture that could potentially grow his wealth. He was easily the wealthiest person in Gambia and ranked among the wealthiest African heads of state. According to the Attorney General and Justice Minister, Jammeh, in the span of 22 years, stole approximately $362 million. Another source put Jammeh's total wealth at close to $1 billion. When he went into exile, he left behind a highly indebted, poor country in deep economic malaise, and a poverty-stricken people whose hopes for better living conditions and improved economic well-being dashed. Money spent on luxuries and siphoned through corruption could have been otherwise utilized to improve maternal health care, nutrition programs for children, build a library for UTG, and a raft of other social needs. It is on this score that Gambians, especially the poor, women and youth, suffered the most severe violations of human rights. Corruption has a direct and immediate negative effect on social and economic well-being of citizens. Each misappropriated dalasi is a dalasi that could have been otherwise provided for the immediate needs of Gambians. This corruption constitutes structural violence, as it kills indirectly when children and adults do not have adequate access to medication for common ailments. When student learning facilities are less than adequate, students and staff by extension cannot perform optimally. As a result, it robs the nation of well-trained personnel and their potential contribution to development, empowerment of the population. This too is a human rights violation. In fact, it is a crime against humanity, in my view.
Let's call it a crime against the people. Just to avoid getting into murky waters. But I can't agree more with you that the corruption was so endemic that it's a big violation of the rights of the people.
Absolutely.
Because of the important element of the opportunity cost.
Yes.
Those monies, as you said, could have been used for the advancement and development of the people instead of one personal self-aggrandizement and to cater for one's excessive luxury taste.
Yes.
So now let's move to the other rights that, that you looked into.
Okay.
And this is the interesting concept of group and cultural rights. And for this, perhaps, I would ask that at the outset, you read out your introduction to it. That is paragraph 86.
86, okay.
And on this one, we can hold a bit of the conversations in Mandinka, if you wish.
Okay, my Mandinka is rusty.
You can try.
Okay.
But read out paragraph 86.
Okay.
Up to the reference of Sharif and Anderson.
Okay. Mandinkas in general suffered immeasurably, primarily because of their ethnic and cultural identity. Jammeh consistently hurled insults at his arch-political rival,
Jammeh anyo sabanyolu ayeneng kabulela.
Okay, Honorable Ousainou Darboe,
Molumen beko Honorable Ousainou Darboe.
calling him a drunkard
Akomu dolominna siratoleti.
and branding Mandinkas unpatriotic,
Ako mandinkolu mu banku dinjawol leti.
non-Gambians, and power-hungry.
Ako ninkumolu manke banku din kendolti andung olu wasabalol le molti.
In fact, Adama Dieng,
Ako Adama Dieng,
the UN Secretary or Special Advisor of the UN Secretary General on Prevention of Genocide,
Adama Dieng menka UN la alifa yamari puru ikana hadama dungulu fa nyama mensiki albalati.
said that a political rally on June 3rd
Ako politik rally o keta June karoti lisabo
at Talinding,
menketa talinding.
Jammeh referred to the Mandinka as enemies and foreigners.
Jamme ko mandinkolu mu luntangol leti nyim bankun kan adum ulumu jawol leti nyim bankun kan.
Dieng, an internationally acclaimed jurist,
Jeng mu banku nim bankute ma lonna leti sartol la karola.
said it was a dangerous high code, irresponsible for Jammeh
Ako jamelo kuma sangara baleti adum kule me ya lonko ku dibiru le memambetea.
Jammeh further threatened to kill Mandinkas
Jamme kontinenta kanyin silandiro foko abe mandinkolu falale
one by one and place them where even a fly could not see them.
akabe mandinkolu fala killing ando abe kele damen hani siolu fangolu te olu furewulu jela.
Thank you.
Numbara.
Thank you. Perhaps we can now dispense with the Mandinka interpretation because of the we need the time to be able to complete today's testimony.
Thank you.
But it was important to flag that out for people to understand. But not only Dieng responded to this.
Yes.
In fact, a lot of Gambian intellectuals
Absolutely.
signed petitions, and on that day, all of us, those of us who signed that petitions, claimed to have been Mandinkas on that day. All of us were Mandinkas, and we all stood up against Jammeh's vitriolic rhetoric.
Absolutely.
This bordered on the call for genocide
Yes.
against the Mandinkas.
Yes. The early beginnings.
Yeah.
Yes.
This, to some extent, reinforces your argument that this was a leader gone mad. Perhaps only that people did not realize. But not only did he so badly attack the Mandinkas, he also did not spare other groups who were engaging in activities that he did not
Yes.
subscribe to.
Yes.
Women and skin bleaching. Can you tell us about that?
Well, that was one of his pet peeves. Ironically, Jammeh, if you'll excuse me, loved women who were light-skinned, ironically. And he came up with decisions or pronouncements that in the end he couldn't protect or sustain. But he talked about arresting women for engaging in skin bleaching activity. I think this is uncalled for. I think it's a violation of rights. I think women have a right to do with their bodies what they deem fit. I know that's a murky area when it comes to abortion and other things. But when it comes to skin bleaching or how they want to dress, how they want to do their hair, I think that's a personal right that must be protected.
But he also attacked other groups.
Yes.
The gay community.
The gay community in particular. And I think he was really pandering to the Middle East and traditionalists and those who I would say, are conservative Muslims and some Christians as well. The gay issue is a big one, not only in the Gambia, but increasingly in other parts of the world. And it is not a Western thing. It is oftentimes attributed as being a Western imposition and that it ought to be rejected. These are, some would argue, natural tendencies amongst humans as well as animals. And I think at some point, the Gambia will need to consider what kinds of protections gays enjoy in this country. I know it's very controversial, but I think a future constitution ought to at least propose some remedy for discrimination against gays and lesbians.
His attacks against this group were so bad, according to your report, he lambasted them by calling their activities unnatural,
Yes.
un-Islamic, and deeply offensive to African traditional values. Is this in fact true, that it is deeply offensive to traditional African values?
I don't believe so. Look, if you had told me 50 years ago that there were gays in Gambia, I wouldn't have believed you. But over time, it became apparent. And upon reflection, yes, we have gays in the Gambia. They don't have as big a constituency as in other places. They are not as out as they are in other places, but they do exist. And I think increasingly, they are demanding protection, as in other African countries, of their rights and privileges to live their lives, not to have the state legislate whom they love, essentially.
And to a lesser extent, or perhaps even more seriously, by unilaterally, unconstitutionally, and unlawfully declaring the Gambia an Islamic state.
Islamic State, yes.
He attacked or infringed upon the rights of others, the Christian community.
Yes.
What do you say about that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I have something along those lines, that it was a flagrant violation of group rights. Christians constituting a group, a cultural group, a religious group, and I would even say a cultural group in so many ways. And I believe that he went too far in doing just that.
And would you say it was in fact also a dangerous enterprise, considering
Risky, yes.
that in this country, religious problems were hitherto unknown. Muslim and Christians live together,
Yes.
side by side,
Yes.
without any problems. We've never known of any religious problems. And by doing this act, in
Yes.
fact, he started.
I think he was,
Opened a Pandora's box.
yes. I think he was trying to create a problem where none existed. Again, this was a convenient way of pandering again to a constituency that had domestic as well as international supporters.
But that said, there are good things that he also achieved for certain groups, like women, for instance. Could you tell us about that?
Yes. In the report, I basically suggest that
Paragraph 89.
89, Jammeh should be credited for having promoted many women to important positions of power, including several women cabinet ministers. That was also true in the civil service. Aisotunjai said he served as his vice president for several decades until Jammeh's ouster in 2016. And many others, including Susan Wafa-Ogu, served in various cabinet posts among several other women. Jammeh must also be credited for having seen the Women's Amendment Act of 2010 through the National Assembly. This expansive law banned female circumcision and extended a raft of protections in favor of women and girls. Although the ban on female circumcision was itself more symbolic than substantive, it was nevertheless a significant milestone in Gambian politics and cultural history.
Indeed. Some would argue that some of these appointments were basically posturing.
Well, so are the appointments of many others, politicians. I think I want to see Jammeh as having at least made an effort in some regard. I don't want to see him or paint him as totally irredeemable. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. There are still some redeeming value. There's some redeeming value to Yahya Jammeh. I think he did some good things.
Just a point of correction.
Yes.
The act you refer to is the Women's Act of 2010 and amended in 2015.
2015. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I will make a note of that.
Yes.
2015.
Yes. The amendment came in 2015.
2015. Thank you.
I must thank Hadi Dande Jabi for that.
Thank you.
Yes. But that aside, he also did important things with regards to girls' education. Tell us about that.
Well, if you look at the culture that we live in, girls, women have not really have had a fair shake. They've never received a fair shake. Be it in the household, in education, health, and other sectors of the society. I think free education for girls, to me, represents a very important achievement in his administration. There's controversy surrounding that.
Was it free education or free primary education?
Education, primary education. And that even too, is contested. But at least the mere policy pronouncement and his decision to do so, I think should be seen in a relatively more positive light compared to the other things that he did. Clearly, it was for the most part political, but it had a positive outcome.
In your assessment, you would say, or would you say, that Jammeh took CEDAW seriously, that is the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women?
I believe he did, to some degree. He may not have been aware of it or understand the niceties of it, but he really promoted a lot of relatively poor Gambians, including young men and boys, who otherwise wouldn't have a university or a high school education. I mean, he basically opened up opportunities.
Yeah. Perhaps also, maybe it's a little more profound than that, because if you look at the early days of Jammeh, a lot of the important positions in government went to women. Solicitor General was woman, Accountant General was woman, Attorney General was woman, Auditor General was woman. 1995 thereabout.
Yes.
So it looks like he took that seriously.
Yes, I think he did.
At least that is one important.
Yes.
At least.
And I think women were his constituency also. I mean, women played a very important part in his re-elections after each election. So I think he pandered to them. He taunted the men. He played a game of divide and rule. And I think at some point it worked for him and worked very effectively.
Well, it worked for him, you said. That signals motives and personal. So let's move on to that. The next question.
Okay.
What were the underlying motives and perspectives that led to the commission of the alleged human rights violations and abuses? Specifically, I'm referring to page 33 of the report from paragraph 91 onwards.
From 91 onward.
Yes, please. So can you dissect this one for us?
Okay.
What were the underlying motives and perspectives?
I believe, as we have talked about earlier, Jammeh, for the most part, was driven by a lust for power, to control and maintain power at any expense, to keep himself at the top of the game. Clearly, there have been so many undercurrents that shaped his thinking, I would say, as we talked about yesterday, Machiavelli, the Prince. I suspect he read that. I think he also read Marx, among others, Malcolm X, because he was leaning more and more, it seemed to me, to the left.
There is talk that as a high school boy, he gravitated towards Moja or fraternized with Doi.
Yes.
So would that have any impact on
I believe so.
his cognitive or operational code, as
I believe
you would
so.
put it, his cognitive map?
I believe so. He was at a very tender age, very formative early age of his development. Yet, oddly, he was also influenced by people like Sese Seko, Mohamed Sese Seko, Sana Abacha, Rawlings, and a host of others. And I think all this combined to shape the reasons and the motivations that he pursued in his career.
In his rhetoric, he seemed to have emulated one of Africa's more notorious leaders. Could you tell us about that?
Are you talking about Idi Amin?
No, you are talking about Idi Amin.
Well, Idi Amin, yes. I think he was a miniature Idi Amin in so many respects. The gravity of his violations were not as severe as perhaps Idi Amin.
Are you serious, Dr. Saine?
Yes,
Professor Saine?
Well, I think Idi Amin might have killed a lot more people. That's my belief.
Might have, possibly.
But at the same time, I do believe that any life lost, be it one or two, certainly is unacceptable and is a crime against citizens. Yes, he emulated them, I believe, and did it fairly well.
Attacks against the West,
Yes,
deflection of problems to others,
yes, absolutely.
self-aggrandizement.
All of that, as we talked about yesterday. I think
Self-attribution of all these lofty accolades that one has not achieved.
yes, I think he was deeply insecure,
Attacks against academics.
and while he loved to abuse academics, he really loved also their accomplishments, the degrees, the professors, the doctor, the sheikh, you name it.
Somebody, I think it was a Mr. Mboji in Norway, who called him Sepat, Sheikh His Excellency Professor Alhaji Doctor.
That's a good one. I like that. I'll have to take that note. I can use it later, perhaps.
I think I read that some years ago, but quite interesting. But on that, we should add Babili Mansa and Nasiruddin.
Yes.
So it becomes even more difficult to pronounce and even learn.
Very grandiose. Yes.
You went on in paragraph 93 of the report. Could you kindly read that out?
Okay. Jame, by virtue of his pronouncements and policy decisions, is a classical and political realist. To recap, classical and political realists see politics as a pursuit for power in a world in which might makes right. Politics are a zero-sum game, a dog-eat-dog world where top dogs dictate the rules of the game and the rest follow. Yet, as a classical realist, Jame was also acutely cognizant of day-to-day political events and developments in the UN, the ICC, and succeeded in hosting the AU summit in 2005, just before the 2006 elections. This made him politically astute and thus a political realist at best.
Could you continue with
Sure.
94? That too is quite fundamental.
Okay. Fundamentally, this shaped Jame's perspectives on domestic and global politics with the overriding motive to hold on to power in spite, perhaps because of mounting internal opposition. It would be an understatement to suggest Jame was power-driven. He understood geopolitics and realpolitik. This is how to seize, maintain, and defend power through use of military power with little to no moral consideration, even if it meant the loss of life, as in the case of 44 Ghanaians slaughtered in the shores of the Gambia in 2005. Civilian politicians represent the enemy, who, from his perspective, are irreversibly corrupt and evil. Jame was bent on making life for his enemies miserable, his mantra being, get them before they get you. Being a fairly astute observer of politics at the global and regional levels, Jame knew that regional and global leaders were self-consumed with challenges of their own and had little strategic interests in a country as the Gambia. He also knew it was only a matter of time before international condemnations of his outrageous policies would subside and politics would return to business as usual.
Until he got it wrong.
Yes.
In December 2016.
2016, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because as you suggested in paragraph 95, that for much of these 22 years, while he did these shenanigans, he had the support of countries in the sub-region, Nigeria, Ghana, and Sierra Leone.
Yes.
And but that ended 2016.
Yes. Big miscalculation.
Indeed. In paragraph 96, you talked about how power meant everything to Jammeh, and that he had to hold on to it by any means necessary.
Yes.
Isn't that a very strong statement to use under the circumstances, or you think it captures who Jammeh was really?
I think it does capture him vividly as he was.
His reversal in December 2016 from accepting the result to claiming that he no longer accepts the result. Does that resonate with this finding that you have?
It could, yes.
Could you read out paragraph 97?
97. Throughout his 22-year rule, Jammeh also survived on instinct, always a step ahead of his enemies. He manipulated men and women twice his age and certainly more educated.